Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another edition of This Week in the Busch League, hosted by the Chief and the Champ. I'm the Chief, and today I learned the difference between baking soda and baking powder.
And there is a big difference. And I am the champ. I am Jamie Salandong, owner of the Space Otters, and I am so old, I actually played against Jamie Moyer.
Oh, you did? You played against
I
Jamie
did.
Moore.
I batted against Jamie Moyer and grounded out to second base against him.
One at bat?
One at bat, one AB.
Was it a tough at bat? I imagine he didn't throw very hard. I don't know. Maybe in high school he did he?
Honestly, it wasn't like it was faster than most normal high schoolers, but it wasn't overpowering, and it was one of those tryout camps. Remember that they used to have that Case would send people to? So it was a Cincinnati Reds tryout camp, and they had you do different drills, and then you would obviously everybody knew it was like, hey, there's Jamie Moore, there's Jamie Moore, there's Jamie Moore, because he played at Solderton High School. And so I did get a chance to bat against him, and that's my big claim to fame. And he was still playing up 10 years ago, up to 10 years ago, 8 years ago. He played till he's 48 or 49, I believe.
Yeah, he actually might have pitched when he was 49 with the Colorado Rockies. That's what I think and he only made a couple starts. I think I'm looking it up now. I think he was trying to get to 50. So he retired in 2012 at the age of 49.
Yep. Yeah. Wow, that's still pretty impressive.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So what's going on between baking powder and baking soda? What did you muck up?
Well, I had to buy baking soda this morning, and then I thought, well, there's baking powder. I'm looking for baking soda. Maybe I'll just get the baking powder. And I thought, nope, just stick to the list. Just follow the list. And I got baking soda. And for those of you who don't know, baking soda is sodium bicarbonate, which requires an acid and a liquid to become activated and help baked goods rise. While baking powder includes sodium bicarbonate as well as an acid. So it only needs liquid. So there you go. I still don't know really the difference. Just I know the words that make it different now.
Damn, I didn't realize you had this kind of science background. You're kind of like Walter from Breaking Bad. That's impressive.
Yeah. I never did bad science. Are you a bad science student? You're math-oriented, so science is math-oriented, right?
I never really liked science because it was hard for me to apply. Had they had something had I known in chemistry class that I was going to make beer 20 years later and been able to apply those principles, then I probably would have paid more attention.
Yeah. I struggled with the abstract when you had to build an H2O molecule, and I put one of the O's in the wrong spot, or the hydrogen's in the wrong spot, and the guys tell me no, I would go here, and I'm thinking, how the hell do you know? The thing's microscopic. This is all fake to me. It's a styrofoam ball. I'm taking two other styrofoam balls on with a stick. Don't tell me what it looks like.
And 40 years later, we're saying it looks like COVID-19 now.
Yeah, that thing looks like some sort of Nerf ball when I see it on the picture.
Oh, my.
Yeah. All right. So, the other follow-up question I have for you with Jamie Moyer, was he the best pitcher you ever faced?
That's a great question because I really don't remember a whole lot. I mean, obviously there were some really good pitchers from Boyertown. So I'm going to say no. There were some pitchers from Boyertown. There was a guy that played at Pottstown that actually threw a pretty good changeup, which was the first good changeup I'd ever seen before. So no, it wasn't. Obviously in Legion in high school didn't see that many great pitchers. There were some that can throw pretty hard, but I didn't see, not like you, that probably saw a lot of breaking balls and some significant fastballs.
Well,
what about you?
The good thing about me is even when I got to college, I'm 5'4", 160 at that point. No one's throwing me breaking balls. They're throwing me fastballs. And that's what I liked. I mean, no one's messing around with me. They're not thinking, all right, I got to figure out a plan how to deal with this guy. They're just saying, hey, man, yeah, he's probably going to hit a ground ball. Just throw a fastball and see what happens. Yeah, that was the best part about me.
Are you suggesting that their manager was saying, hey, no toying around with this guy, just go after him with the hard stuff?
Yeah, that's exactly what they were saying. Yeah. And I faced an actual, I think the kid pitched for the Cardinals, actually for the St. Louis Cardinals. Last name was Morton, Kevin Morton. He pitched for the Cardinals. And another guy
Morton.
named Morris.
I don't remember that last name. I'll take a look.
Yeah, and another guy was Morris. He had a brother that pitched. I can't remember his first name. Anyway, yeah, they were probably the two best players that I faced. Yeah, no, Kevin Morton played with the Red Sox, so I was wrong. Was there a Matt Morris that played with the?
Yes, Matt Morris played with the Cardinals. He was a pretty good pitcher. Yeah, I see Kevin Morton here. So you played against him when he played at Seton Hall?
Yeah, and there was another guy. Matt Morris had a brother that played at Seton Hall as well. He was a pretty good pitcher, but Kevin Morton was probably the better one. And
okay.
Yeah, and Boardtown had a kid named Shanley. Can't remember. He was a lefty, but.
Daryl Shane? Was it Daryl?
Yeah, it was Darrell or Daryl or something.
Yeah.
He threw the ball probably harder than anybody ever faced. He threw the ball that hard. But again, I'm hitting ninth. I'm a junior. I'm 5'4", 120 at that time. He threw me 2 fastballs, and I hit him. I think I grounded out the shortstop twice. But, yeah, no one was throwing change-ups to me. Ever. Yeah, it's just yeah, they weren't doing that. But anyway, so we have some Busch League stuff to do. Joe Godfrey is going to be on our show. He just texted me. I got to give him about 15 minutes, and then we're going to bring him on to talk about some changes in baseball. But kind of our genre today is what to do with the Busch League draft, right?
Yes.
And there seems to be, every day I wake up, I feel differently, that there may be a baseball season about 60 games. I'm guessing about 60 games. If these guys can get their act together and put a 60-game schedule on the table that everybody will sign off on. And are you still, you talked last time about you still want to have the draft at 60 games, even though we're recognizing that baseball is stupid for doing this. Are you still thinking that way?
I am. It would probably just be better if we could have, gone to sleep in March and then woke up when baseball started and not have to hear everything in between, right? Because it's infuriating to get to this point. They just all look like such bad actors. But we talked on the last podcast, Roger, that I would prefer to have a Busch League season in some sort of format. It's not going to be just like Major League Baseball and all sports. It's not going to be the baseball as we know it because it's not really life as we know it right now. So I would still be interested to have a Busch League draft and whatever form that looks like. And, I think you and I have a couple of ideas.
Yeah, and I agree with you too. And like we talked about before, I think it's more important that we have all 10 owners than what our Busch League season looks like. That would be more important to me, that we have the 10 that participate. And even though we can make it, I think you've used the word gimmicky. We're going to have to modify it a little bit. What are some of your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I like the idea that you said to make sure that, we can get all 10 because, that at its heart is the core of the league and the reason why the league has lasted this long. But, some of the things that I would think of is I realize that a lot of people are going to have a hard time doing a draft in the summertime on weekends just because people have vacations, that type of thing. So I would be completely open to having an actual online draft using like either CBS, which hosts our league, or even a Yahoo draft. That what we do is we say, hey, let's pause the 2019 season and say that the 2020 season is just kind of for fun. Obviously, we're still going to make it competitive, but it has no retention value into 2021. So the hopscotch retention from 2019 to 21 and use, those rosters in 2021 and make 2020 an open season. And, we can do a draft and people can draft. Basically, we can do a snake draft is kind of my idea. And then we can decide on, do we want to have retention in those drafts or just draft 23 players? And with those 23 players, that's it. And that we have weekly fab that you use as your reserve. Or we do it daily. Or do we do some other things like, do we add some different stat categories just for this particular year? Do we say that you have to draft at least one player from every National League team? Just something to kind of keep the interest. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with the snake draft thing. I think that's probably the most efficient way to get all 10 owners on board, because we're getting into possibly some short decision times, meaning that they could come up with in 10 days a schedule that starts July 19th, and we basically have 3 weekends to get together. So unless we were willing to meet on a Sunday, the Saturdays seem kind of booked. So I think the draft online is a good idea. I like the idea of holding 2019 rosters, so that would be your retention if you wanted it going into the 2021 season. I wouldn't want to. Yeah, I wouldn't want to have retention. I wouldn't want to have retention through the snake draft because people they might not necessarily get who they want. Whereas, theoretically, you could buy any player you wanted in our draft. If you wanted a player, you could spend the money to go get him. Where a snake draft, you don't have that capability. Yeah, and I'm okay having the traditional rotisserie type stats. I don't know if I'd want to get into a daily or a weekly, just because I don't think that's in our battle rhythm of what we've been doing the last 37 years. And I think some people like that it's not a daily or a weekly, head-to-head type thing.
Well, we're not doing head. Well, we could do head-to-head if we want, but I guess we would still have. This would be open for discussion. Would we still have weekly roster moves, which would mean essentially fab? Would we have a reserve round after the draft or something like that? And I'm kind of wide open in all this.
Yeah, I'd like to keep it the same format, but that's just my opinion. And but I think it's worth having it. I would hate to watch. It's been a long time since I watched baseball and didn't have this. Didn't have this league, and I need something to force myself to sit and watch it because I'm so freaking annoyed at these people.
No, I would agree. And in fact, I would ask, all 3 owners that listen to this, solicit your ideas. I'll try and send something out to everyone, although it's really hard to try and put that all down into words. I just don't write very well. So for me to try and send that out to everybody, and we have certain owners that don't use certain documents, that type of thing. So it just becomes a little bit, more challenging, if you will.
Yeah, we might have to go old school and actually pick up a phone.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah, we might actually have to drive to people's houses and say, "Hey, we're here representing the Busch League owners. Will you agree to get online for 2.5 hours or whatever that would be?" Yeah.
Yeah, we could, if we wanted to, we can make this work. Now, hopefully, we don't have any disagreements where 3 of the owners say they don't want to do this, like Major League Baseball, right?
Yeah, we might have to incentivize it. Yeah.
All these small market owners are complaining about the large market owners, and I would have to think that you're a large market owner, being that you have all central Pennsylvania.
Yeah, no one follows me. No. I don't have all central. I got Tom to deal with in the north. Like that North Berks County area, he drops down into those northern Lancaster County too. So he takes up some of my fan base. Yeah.
Yeah, he does. He does have a kind of reach, right? He's got that radio reach, that 50,000 watt station coming out of Berks County that attracts a lot of people.
I'm not so sure he's not manipulating stats because he does work for the power company, and I don't know, maybe he can work his way in there.
Yeah, well, him and Bill. Bill owns everything south of the Mason-Dixon, so he's got a big reach also.
Yeah. Okay, so it seems like we have a shell of an agreement, Tony Clark. Never mind. Sounds like sounds like we're on the same page as what we would like to have the draft look like. We're just going to have to find a way of effectively communicating and getting ideas from other owners, and we'll see what that looks like. Of course, we're talking about this and not sure if there's going to be a baseball season.
Right.
During those negotiations that are leak out. What are your thoughts on Manfred?
Well, I had just read the book by Bud Selig, and Rob Manfred was actually his, legal side of the commissioner's office when Bud Selig was in office. And in the book, he speaks really highly of Rob Manfred. I guess the concern is just all of the egos that you have involved, because Rob Manfred, as commissioner, works for the owners, and you have 30 different egos. Now, I mean, that's not to say that the 750 Major League Baseball players that are in the Players Association don't have egos as well. But I think you had mentioned, Raj, you talked to me about this, that when you leave a negotiation, you have a pretty good idea of the people you're representing and how they would feel when topics are brought to the table.
Yeah, when you leave, especially it was a small group. I'm not saying Manfred and Clark met one-on-one, which probably they should have. But yeah, it was a small group of people who probably met. And when you walk out of there, Manfred he's of the belief that like it's a done deal. They're just working out basic logistics and times. And Tony Clark responds within 5 minutes of that meeting saying, "We don't have a deal." And then you're like, "Well, wait a minute. What the hell? Like, can you not read people that were, or I think he just can't deal with the owners. I just think he's soft and he can't deal with them for whatever reason. Or maybe there's a couple of them that he can't figure out or he can't convince. But and I know they're his bosses, which is the stupidest thing in the world, that you're going to have this guy run a league, be the commissioner of the league, and really he's just a puppet. If that's what he is, then he should just say, "Hey, look, I'm just a puppet. I'm the one negotiating the deal, but I got to run it by these 30 people." And, he should just come out and say that. Don't act like you're a commissioner of a league when you're really just doing what 30 people tell you to do.
So that draws into question, how was Bud Selig, I guess we'll term him to be very effective, right? Because during his watch, they've had 25 years of labor peace. And so I guess my question to you is, do you think some of that has come from the fact that he actually started as an owner of a small market team?
Yeah, and maybe that does have a lot to do with it. And I never thought about it until I'm seeing what's going on now. But yeah, maybe he had the gumption to deal with the trouble, the owners that are paying the rear end, which I'm sure there are numerous of them, and knowing how to deal with them,
Do you think any of these owners, because one of the recurring themes that I guess he would tell owners, because a lot of times I think he would have to have a unanimous support, 30 owners, and one of the things he would impress upon people. Now, obviously, he's looking back, but the record speaks for itself. And I was never a Bud Selig fan early on, but he would always impress that, hey, sometimes you need to do this for the good of the game. George Steinbrenner, you're not going to make every last dollar, but to have some sort of competitive balance and to make the league more popular, you may need to take a short-term hit to gain more value. And the proof is in the pudding. If you judge his success on the valuation of the sports franchise, and particularly baseball franchises, then it was a rousing success.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Yeah, and maybe he had that gumption that you know those that 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 personality that he could deal with the personalities that were kind of a pain in the neck. Yeah.
Well, and see, obviously you're much better than that. You can do that, right? Having that kind of background in your work. I remember one time you came to me after a trade, and you told me to my face, you said, "You don't know how to deal with people." That's what you told me.
I said that facetiously. Yeah.
You told me I'm not a people person, and I said, "Well, isn't that pretty apparent because I'm an accountant?" So yeah, of course not.
That's funny. All right. Hey, listen, we're going to have to take a brief hiatus on this topic. I'm going to reach out to Joe to bring our guest on. So, we got Joe Godry on the line. He is, right now, he is the athletic director of Penn State Schuylkill. He's been there for is this your third year, Joe? Is this your third year at Penn State?
Yeah, Raj, just finished my third year of athletic seasons, and it'll be my third-year anniversary on the job will be October.
Okay. And I know you're looking forward to celebrating that. So just so you know, Joe and I have been friends for 30 years. We played in junior college together. Joe has spent a better part of, correct me if I'm wrong, about 25 to 30 years in Division I baseball, both as an assistant coach and a head coach at Villanova University, where he did that for 15 years. Am I right about 30 years?
Yeah, pretty much pushing that. About 15 years as a head coach at Villanova, and then 13, 15 years, as an assistant coach all over the place.
Yeah, to include University of Pittsburgh, New Mexico State, some time at Utah, and then at Villanova as well as an assistant. So, Joe, we appreciate you coming on, and some of the reasons that we wanted to talk to you about it is because there is no baseball. So I started a baseball podcast in the year of the pandemic, where there is no damn baseball. So that was perfect timing. So this year baseball went from a 40-round draft to a 5-round draft. What kind of ramifications is that for players who weren't one of those drafted in that 5 rounds?
Yeah, I mean, some of it's, kind of been the same as, just business as usual. Just, if you're a player, you weren't drafted, either your career was over or, you kind of went back to school. I mean, that's happened, every year for as long as they've had the major league draft. With the decreasing to, the 5 rounds, obviously, that created less opportunity. But the unique point was with the pandemic, players that were seniors were able to go back to their institution and, play another year. It also impacts, the incoming group. It probably from the high school level may be a little bit more impactful because your high-profile Power 5 baseball schools, your Texases, Florida's, Arizona State's, that group, they would typically go out and recruit, 20 to 25 incoming players, either high school players or junior college players, with the expectation of maybe half of them would show up because they would lose, right, 8 to 12 kids to pro ball. Well, now you can see the bottleneck that just created with only having 5 rounds of the draft. The free agency policy this year was that you were able to sign free agents for $20,000, no more than $20,000. So that would probably relieve some of the returning seniors that would take that money and go. But for a high school player, potentially a junior college player, pending where academics was in their life, they're not taking that deal. So, we're having a lot of players now that are going to show up at a, university campus to play baseball in a much larger number than, what everybody expected when these kids signed with these schools, 2, 3, even 4 years, prior
Yeah.
to, an August date.
So from a Division One perspective, you talked about the Power Five schools. Is there the same bottleneck for the smaller Division One schools, like the schools in the Northeast?
Yeah, what happens for the at the university level? What happened is you're allowed to have 11.7 scholarships that you're able to give out in increments of 25%, meaning you couldn't give a kid a scholarship less than 25%.
Right.
There's a variety of ways you can stack that money to get to 25%. You're allowed to have, I think it was 27 or 28 players were allowed to be on scholarship. And when you got into the spring, you were allowed to have 35 players on an active roster.
Okay.
So what the MCA did was they provided relief. They took the 27, 28 scholarship players. They eliminated that for a year. They expanded the roster, so you were able to have more than 35 players on your roster in the spring.
Right.
What they did was, if you were a senior and say, Rod, Pitt gave you 25% scholarship and you wanted to come back for your senior year, the school could offer you that same 25% scholarship. They couldn't go above and beyond that. They couldn't say, hey, we're going to bring back a pitcher and he was on 50% scholarship, but for 1 year, since, we're Mississippi State, maybe, as an example, and we have money for baseball, we're going to bring our pitchers back at 100%, so there's no out-of-pocket expense.
Okay.
You were not allowed to do that. So they were able to bring back their players for whatever they were receiving for their senior year, and then they were able to, everything else, juniors down into incoming freshmen, they still had to fit into that 11.7 bubble.
Wow.
But not every school, not every school did that. Not every school offered that money to seniors to come back. That was done at the university level. The NCAA just provided that opportunity for that. So yes, that affected schools in the Northeast. And then the Ivy League, they don't give scholarships, but they also don't do red shirts. So they didn't give any of their senior baseball, softball players, track players an extra year of eligibility at an Ivy League school. So anybody that played there, graduated there, if they wanted to continue baseball, softball, or track, they had to do that at another university.
Okay.
And then the last piece with that is, if you were in that boat, say you were at a player from Florida, and maybe you were a good player, maybe not considered a great player, maybe you were a bench player, the school could deny you money to come back. They could release you, and then you would be able to go out and basically kind of transfer to wherever somebody would take you. You could be offered scholarship money, but you would have to fit into that school's 11.7. You weren't guaranteed whatever money you were getting. And that's where a lot of some of this impact was, is those players that were, kind of told to, kind of move on.
Yeah.
And try to find homes, much like you see with basketball and football.
Yeah. So I guess if you're a college coach and you have a player that's not performing, you could tell him, hey, man, you got to move on. You got to move on. But, but if you got a kid that you want to see develop and you think, man, this kid, I think he'll really produce if we get him another year, then you're in that pinch of trying to fit it into that 11.7 framework. Yeah, that makes it difficult. So I just my basic knowledge, should junior colleges benefit off of this? Should they get kids they wouldn't normally get?
I think that it's a great question. There's not an easy answer to it. I mean, I think that this was the first year of the transfer portal where anybody could put into transfer, in all different sports. And without giving the, full definition of transfer portal, I can tell you, I was reading as I was preparing for this, that there was over 1,000 names of Division I, Division II college baseball players in transfer portal.
Oh my God!
Meaning that they submit their name in there, and that allows them to speak with any school that wants to contact them.
Holy
So it's kind of like a waiver to speak with somebody without having a waiver to speak anymore, and it's public knowledge. And so there's going to be a trickle down effect just because. If you have 1 year of expanded rosters, and the people that it really affects, if you're, like I said, if you're a sophomore or junior, if you're a bench player, if you're a part-time player, you're a platoon player, all of a sudden you just got hit on both ends. You got hit with, hey, people that maybe were in starting roles coming back, or juniors that you thought like, wow, they're going to leave from the draft. So you're going to have experienced players that play every day coming back.
Yeah. You're
going to have an influx of new players, of some players that were going to be major league draft picks that, that they're going to be competing for playing time. So that middle piece of players, it's like are kind of in, the abyss a little bit of what's going to happen to them. Like some may be able to qualify to go to a junior college because, maybe they're a freshman going into their sophomore year, but you may have a kid that's a sophomore going into his junior year. That's not an option.
Yeah.
You may, just dealing with this when I was at Villanova in conversations with players that, would discuss transferring. You may get a school that's $65,000, and you spent $170,000 worth of an education right now, and are you going to go play your last year and get a degree that's maybe worth $100,000?
Yeah, no,
and so there's a lot of there's a lot of things that go into these decisions, and I just really think that. I think college baseball is going to be really, really good as far as the product that they can put on the field. But there's going to be a lot of people that, that middle group of people are really going to have their careers end a lot sooner than what they thought.
Yeah.
Because coaches are going to take care of their I have a starter and he's performing. Well, I get an extra year out of him, and if I'm bringing in my high school player that was, I thought I was going to lose to the draft, or like, hey, this is going to be the face of the program moving forward. Well, I got to get him in the games. Yeah, so
absolutely. And I imagine,
tough crunch.
And I imagine with the smaller Division I schools, you get a pitcher that wouldn't, you think this kid's probably going to get drafted in the 10th round, and we're not going to see him, and then he doesn't get drafted, and he comes, you're going to figure out a way to get that pitcher onto your roster. Like,
right.
You're going to figure out a way.
And then the lower levels, too, just like your point, Roger, is a trickle-down effect. I mean, there's going to be kids leaving the SEC and the Big 12 and the Pac-12, and, they're going to go into the, to the Big East or the West Coast Conference, or, somewhere in the Midwest and, the Big Ten, and they're going to make impacts in those programs. Mm-hmm. And so it's a trickle down all the way down to, then kids are going to wind up in D2, NAIA, and, back to the junior college thing. So it's going to be impactful, for I would say at least 5 years. I mean,
sure.
You got to play that whole cycle out. Everybody that was just playing college baseball, softball, or track just got an extra year.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah. With limited opportunity to go at the next level.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I forgot about the NAIA schools. Hell, they don't even have rules. Like, they should be hanging around those campuses.
Well, we're an NAIA school. We do have some rules.
Oh, come on.
But they have a lot of more flexibility. They don't have the transfer rules. Really, a lot of things that you see that the NCAA are doing is kind of what the NAIA has done forever. You know what I mean? That they didn't have the transfer rule issues that NCAA Division One did, and they're actually moving more towards that model of just kind of like the player notifies the compliance director of, hey, I'm looking to make a move, and you feel free to make a move. They kind of took the coach out of it. They kind of took that whole, hey, I have to go talk to my coach, and it's, I have to get approval, and all that stuff's done. It's more Wild Wild West.
So let me ask you, this is a little off topic, but you're saying thousands of baseball players are in the transfer portal. How many of them do you think are really worth calling out of the 1,000? Is it just people guys who just can't make the team or aren't that good, and they're not getting on the field, and they're thinking, all right, I'm going to transfer. I'm sure that goes on.
I think when it first started, I think you had a lot of that.
Okay.
I think the transfer portal, jumping into another sport, basketball, it's crazy. People think people transfer in baseball. Basketball, there's a 50-55% transfer rate. It's outrageous. You don't play, you're going somewhere else. And I think that baseball, is the one that always had the mark against it for that. You know what I'm saying? Because it was a partial scholarship sport.
Yeah.
Football and baseball, or football and basketball, they kind of held you over a barrel because, you were getting a full scholarship if you're on scholarship, and, were you going to walk away from that? Baseball for years, before it's only been, say, 10 years or about 10 years that you had to have a minimum of a 25% scholarship. When we were playing or 15 years ago, you could get offered a scholarship by Florida State, and they could say, hey, I'm going to give you books. No, by the way, I'm going to give it to you starting January 1st, and you show up in the fall, and you're there for 2 weeks, and they cut you. And so, but you signed a letter of intent. You couldn't go anywhere else, and they were untold stories.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so now, with this portal, I think there used to be a lot of that. Well, I'm disgruntled, or hey, all of a sudden, I was a pretty average player in high school, and I went to the MAC conference or the Atlantic 10 conference, and wow, all of a sudden I was throwing 84 miles an hour, and over the summer now I'm throwing 92 miles an hour. Let me put my name out here and see if I can find a better option. Now I think with the pandemic situation, I think it's more legitimized in the sense of there's a lot of kids that were seniors that had an extra year that their school said, hey, thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah.
And so, they had to kind of get put in here.
And they need to go find a place to play. Yeah.
And find a place to play.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and then the only other question I have for you, are there any benefits to college programs moving ahead with we had talked offline a little bit, and you think baseball's not going back to that 40-round system. Is there a benefit to college baseball?
I think that the benefit to college baseball, like I said, is the product. I think there's going to be it's going to be a better product in Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball and college baseball have been working against each other for as long as it's been in existence, because college coach, the good high school player, there was a battle of, hey, I want this kid to come to college, or should I go play minor league ball at a high school? And that whole debate, you turn on a basketball game, you turn on a football game, the first thing they say is, hey, you know what, Lamar Jackson played football at Louisville, Embiid played basketball at Kansas, all that stuff. College baseball, you don't see that.
Yeah.
You don't see pro baseball do that. We've been talking about that, trying to market both. I think if baseball decreases its rounds, uses college baseball more as a minor league system, like pro football does, college basketball does to some degree.
Yeah.
They'll create a better partnership. They'll create more awareness for college baseball. College baseball, at that point, we'll create some, additional maybe financial dollars for it, for visibility on TV with different networks. And I think it definitely would benefit college baseball in the long term. It's going to benefit college baseball in the short term too.
Yeah.
It's just going to hurt. It's going to hurt the student athlete, some of them.
Yeah.
And there's it's going to hurt colleges because the cost of doing business in the next couple, especially next year, is just going to go. I mean, you have to feed these people. You have to put them in uniforms. You have to travel them around. You have to do it. Well, the expense of having a 30-man roster to a 45-man roster,
that's huge.
That's real cost.
Yeah, that's another bus.
That's real cost.
Now you got two buses.
So,
yeah, and more hotels,
right.
more food. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
so. I think long term it's going to be a great thing for college baseball if it moves in that direction. I just think that with everything that's going on and with athletic budgets being so stressed from losing fall revenues, from losing spring revenue from basketball, I mean, we're really in uncharted waters if football can't kick off on time and finish the season. I mean, we got there's a lot of issues just in college athletics in general.
Yeah, no, I look at a school just like Villanova. I mean, the basketball team didn't go to the tournament, so that's a huge hit in money. Yeah, that's a huge hit in money, and it makes you wonder how Pitt functions. Like none of their teams go to anything. I don't know where the hell the money's coming from.
It's really, they benefit off of like I saw in the NCAA with basketball. Like basketball, they normally pay out like $600 million to universities across the country and conferences, and the conferences split it, and they only paid out like $200 million, and how like that really hurt everybody. Like schools like Pitt and these Power Fives that they're not going to BCS balls, they're not going to the Final Fours, they're not going there. I mean, they're getting $25 to $32 million checks, TV checks for the football and basketball programs.
Yeah,
that money dries up. I mean, that's scary. I mean, people aren't going to be able to function.
Yeah, no, it is scary.
The small schools like I said, like Villanova. I mean, they basically the money that they get from when I was there, the money we got from basketball, that's what was used to operate every other sport at the school.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like basketball had their budget, and and basketball paid for everybody else's budget off of their successes. And so it's definitely it's going to be definitely a wait and see what happens here this fall.
Yeah. And most people don't realize that a lot of Division I coaches in the Northeast up until 15 years ago or so were part-time coaches. I mean, they had other jobs. They were they were high school teachers.
Yeah, when I started my first year as head coach at Villanova, I started part-time.
Yeah.
Now it was in the works. Everything was in place for that position to become full-time. The coach prior to me, George Bennett, legendary coach, guys, in multiple Hall of Fames, won conference championship. George was a teacher at Upper Darby High School. and he made it work.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, schedules were different, time commitments were different. I mean, back then, if you're in the Northeast, recruiting really dealt with, the SEC and the ACC will come up and take whoever they want, and the other top players will either go to St. John, Seton Hall, or Villanova, and that was it.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you could probably mix Rutgers in there a little bit, and then or maybe mix Rutgers in there a lot, but they were your four options in the Northeast, and then they started adding full-time coaches, and people took recruiting a lot more serious than what it was, and schedules changed, and It wasn't like, well, we start the season when we go to spring break, and the world of college baseball changed, 360 over the last 20 years. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's why I applied to Pitt.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Hey, Jamie, you got any questions?
No, well, actually, I do have one. Joe, thanks for, first of all, coming on. And, I don't want to take too much of your time because I know you're a busy guy being a athletic director. I was just looking some stuff up. I see we're practically neighbors. You live in Linfield. Is that right?
That's correct, Linfield, right?
Okay.
Linfield's a suburb of Roarsford for those out there.
Suburb?
Yeah, because I'm over in East Vincent Township, so I'm right down the road. So hopefully, some chance, when maybe out in Phoenixville, when Roger's there, we'll have a chance to meet. Very informative, the background that you gave on just all this information, what's happening in college sports, and you throw the changes in college sports, changes in baseball, and mix a pandemic in it, and it just becomes really crazy. So thank you for navigating through that. I do have one real quick question for you. I just want to know what kind of player, since you played with Roger, what kind of college player was he? What kind of relationship did you guys have when you played?
Oh, me and Roger, best of friends. I mean, I enjoyed every minute playing with Roger. Roger was a really good player. He was a leader on the team, much more of a leader than I. He'd keep me in line, and he was a guy defensively. He got on base on offense, and we played 2 years together at Montgomery County Community College. I went to Colorado State. Roger went to Pitt, and we played for a man named Jim Randolph. And he was, being in baseball for as long as I was. I wish I appreciated Coach Randolph as much as I did then as I do now. And but no, it was great. Like I said, Roger was as close as a friend as I had in baseball, and he was a real solid ball player and was a difference maker for us. We had a solid ball club.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
No, that's good to hear, and I appreciate the time you've taken today to come on and talk to with us. That's great.
So, just real quick, Joe.
Right.
Joe, real quick before I let you go, I enjoyed our 2 years there, and a lot of times it was good memories, and I agree with you about Randolph. He's one of the better coaches I've ever had. Not just mechanics of playing, but just what he probably dealt with growing up in the minor leagues and in college, and yeah, he was a tough dude, man. And I did enjoy those 2 years. Joe, we appreciate it, man. Thanks for calling in.
You got it. I'll see you guys down the road shortly.
All right,
Take
buddy.
care.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye. Got it.
Okay, Jay, you still with us?
Well, that was really good. He answered a lot of questions in terms of just how difficult it is to navigate through college sports, particularly when you're not a revenue generating sport. It just makes it so tough, right? And
yeah.
I guess the people that you deal with, the families, that's probably more of a conversation that we have in Phoenixville at a bar sometimes. Just all the kids that think they're the greatest, and he probably looks at their talent and says, this kid shouldn't be playing even in high school. And having to tell parents that and dealing with that, it's just, oh, boy. It probably ages you pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think it probably does. And it's funny how, if you don't mind, I'll go into a little bit. So when I got to junior college, no one ever talked to me about hitting. Like, I just kind of got in a box and just kind of winged it. I don't know if that's the word. I had no approach. And this guy he talked about hitting constantly. And he really, just through my conversations with him over 2 years about having an approach, having a plan, what do you want to do at this at bat? What should you be doing this at bat? And he would talk like that when we were players. And just 2 years of that just being ingrained in my head, I really felt like he was probably he put me over the top, because I was a below average hitter, and after 2 years there, I hit over 300 both years, and because I had an approach, I had an idea of what I wanted to do, and hitting's a philosophical. It's not like pitching. Pitching's all mechanics, right? You're going to teach a kid 18 pretty much the same mechanics of pitching. You watch Major League Baseball and you watch any pitcher, and you pretty much could show that to any kid and say this is what you kind of want to look like. But hitting's a lot different. Like you watch Gary Sheffield, you would never teach an 8-year-old how to hit like that. Right? But it's worked for Gary Sheffield, right? It's going to get in the Hall of Fame because of how he hit. So, he would talk about having a plan when you get in the box, and yeah, that really helped to me develop me as a being a better all around player.
No, that makes sense, and that's kind of the maturation of sports, right? Each ladder or each rung of the ladder that you climb, you have to do something like that, right? To survive and to move on.
Yeah, you do. Otherwise, you're just going to be If I didn't have that relationship with him, I would have never gone beyond playing in junior college. So, anyway, yeah, that was good. That was a good interview and some really good information. Yeah. So, circling back to baseball topics, we've kind of discussed what you and I think our draft should look like. We're going to reach out to owners and kind of see what their thoughts are, and then kind of play the waiting game with Major League Baseball.
Yep.
Yeah. So just a real quick baseball topics. You put in a note in our notes this week about Hank Aaron. 153 players had struck out 100 times in 2019. 153 players. Over 100 times in 2019. Hank Aaron never struck out over 100 times in a single season.
Yeah, not too bad for a home run hitter, right?
Right. Yeah, a home run hitter to hit 305 for his career. So I looked at some of his stats, and I would argue, again, depending on where you fall on the Barry Bonds thing, Hank Aaron's probably the best overall hitter in the history of baseball. So he didn't strike out. He retired as the home run leader. He's the all-time RBI leader with 2,297 RBIs. He's the all-time total bases leader with 6,856. He only won one MVP, but he finished third 6 times. So,
wow.
And you know what? And I looked back at those MVP votes and wondering if it's like, all right, I wonder if this was a color thing. You know what I mean? This was in the 50s and 60s. I wonder if it was that, but I don't think it was. Don Newcomb won the MVP over one year. William Covey, Ernie Banks won it twice. Sandy Koufax was like 25-4 one year when Aaron finished third, and Joe Torre won the MVP over him 1 year. Joe Torre had an awesome year when he won the MVP. I didn't realize that. Like he hit 360.
That was, 1971?
Yeah, he hit 363. Yeah, he had a really good year. But I almost think it was probably like Hank Aaron got votes just because, like, I don't even know what kind of season he had, but it was an MVP year. And he was probably overlooked in some seasons. Like, come on, Hank Aaron, are we gonna vote for him again? And then he only ends up with one MVP. But yeah, I think you can argue he's the best hitter in baseball history.
It's funny how you lay this out, because I think you make a strong case for that, right? And I wonder about the biases. When he was playing, obviously, Willie Mays was in New York, and then San Francisco. Mickey Mantle was in New York, and here's Henry Aaron playing out Milwaukee, and then later in his career moving to Atlanta, and those aren't the media hotspots. And I wonder if he missed out on that, or did he have a better career because he didn't have to play under those kind of conditions?
Yeah, that's a good point. He didn't play in hot spots. And I was just amazed at the consistency of the guy. That guy was consistent, man. You pretty much knew what you were getting, and he was pretty consistent up until he's about 37 years old. I think that's that's when he finished. That's the last time he finished in the top 3 in MVP votes. Yeah, so he
well, you know who the modern almost, and he's not obviously that doesn't have Henry Aaron's stats, but the person in the modern age, if you will, is kind of Albert Pujols, right? Who didn't strike out a lot, hit for average, had lots of home runs, you know, and was very productive up through his mid-30s.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. Yeah, and I think Pujols probably had years where he had even higher averages. Yeah, that's a real good comparison. He's just quiet. Like, you never hear anything about the guy. You know? If he didn't sign that, I mean, that was a while ago. He didn't sign that 10-year deal. He'd have been pretty quiet his whole career if he would have just signed back with St. Louis as far as publicity. You know, people talking about him.
Well, there you go, right?
Yeah.
And you know, middle of America, you don't hear as much.
No. And then today in baseball history, it's a pretty quiet day in baseball history. It was kind of 1994. The Tigers hit a home run in their 25th consecutive game.
Is that a record?
Yeah, that was a record at the time. Actually, the record was broken again last year. Do you know who that was?
My guess would have been the Minnesota Twins, because they hit 200-300 home runs or some damn thing.
That's what I was thinking until I looked it up. It was the Yankees. Yep.
The Yankees.
31 games.
Okay.
31 straight games.
Wow.
Can you imagine? 31. That's a whole month, man. They hit a home run in every game. Jeez. And then speaking about the Yankees, I hate to highlight them in this. Today is Lou Gehrig's birthday. So Lou Gehrig was an RBI machine when I was looking at his stats. So he had 14 years of pretty much playing every day, right? When 1925 he replaced Wally Pipp. 14 years of playing every day. He had 100-plus RBIs in 13 of those years. The only year was the first year that he started playing every day, and he only played half a season. He had 1,900 total, and then averaged 140. He averaged 149 RBIs a year.
Wow,
Averaged, yeah.
Wow.
So that's knocking him in. So and I don't. And Lou Gehrig's is a guy you really have trouble saying anything bad about, right?
Well, you know, he played. You know, I watched the documentary on him, and you know, obviously he was a quiet guy. I think he basically lived with his parents until up, you know, age 26, 27, 28, something like that. Just a really quiet, mild-mannered guy, and you know, played in the shadow of Babe Ruth, and I think he was probably quite content to do that.
Yeah, and he's a college guy. He was a college baseball player. Yeah. I think he went to Columbia. Anyway.
Columbia, that is right. He was born and bred in New York City.
Yeah, that's all pre-draft stuff. When those days are, I don't know, maybe they're coming back. People just signing people like that. Yeah. All right. So next week, hopefully we can reach out to some of these owners and get their thoughts, and then share them online here to figure out what we're going to do. And hopefully next week we have an agreement, or an agreement that we're not going to play in baseball.
Yeah, you know what? So here's kind of what we'll do is I'll solicit some of the owners, get some ideas from them, and then you know, it's really, as you're pointing out, dependent upon what Major League Baseball does. But maybe what we can do is even have a couple of the owners come on, and you know, I would challenge to them is say, hey, what kind of year would you like to have in the Busch League? How should we do this? And maybe they can come on the podcast and present their cases.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So next week we're back on a Sunday, right?
Yep, I will be there.
Okay. All right, buddy.
Happy Father's Day to everybody.
Yeah, happy Father's Day
to all the.
Enjoy your Sunday.
All right.
See ya.
Thanks, Raj. Stay safe.